The prince humiliated the peasant girl before everyone, but when he read the letter, she had hidden. Before we begin this beautiful period romance story, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I love knowing where you're joining me from. The night glowed like a dream stitched together by candlelight and the hum of violins. The Château de Villeneuve was alive with music and laughter, its halls trembling beneath the rhythm of 100 silk shoes. Beneath the crystal chandeliers, the finest families of France drifted like living ornaments, whispering names and fortunes. It was a night built for those who had never known dust or hunger. And yet, in the shadow of the ballroom doors, stood a girl who had known both. Céline Moreau pressed her hands against her apron to still their trembling. The letter she carried had grown warm from her touch. It bore the wax seal of the late Duchess of Orléans, her village's former benefactress, and Céline had been told in no uncertain terms that it must reach the prince himself. No one else's hands, no one else's eyes. Her heart pounded as she watched the sea of powdered wigs and diamonds before her. The scent of wine and perfume was dizzying. The servants had warned her not to look anyone in the eye, not to speak unless spoken to, but she could not deliver the letter in silence. So she waited for the moment when Prince Etienne de Villeneuve appeared, tall and golden under the chandeliers, a smile shaped like arrogance itself. He was younger than she had imagined, perhaps 25, with an easy charm that made the ladies lean toward him. Every movement he made spoke of confidence bred by generations of power. When he laughed, the crowd followed as though laughter were a command. Céline drew a shaky breath. She stepped forward. A murmur followed her, the rustle of skirts, a hiss of surprise. "The peasant girl," they said. "Who let her in?" Her steps sounded too loud on the marble. The prince's gaze landed on her before she could curtsy. He blinked, amused, and said something to the gentleman beside him. They chuckled. "Your Highness," she whispered. Her voice quavered like a note on the edge of breaking. "I bring you a letter from the Dowager Duchess of Orléans." Etienne tilted his head, the faintest smile on his lips. "Do you now? From the Duchess? A fascinating claim for a village messenger." The guests around him leaned closer. The music softened. Céline held out the envelope with both hands, trying to keep her arms from shaking. The prince did not take it immediately. Instead, he looked her over, the coarse fabric of her dress, the scuffed shoes, the way she clutched the letter as if it were her very breath. "Tell me," he said lightly, "did you find this letter under a rock, or did the Duchess send all her messages through the fields these days?" A ripple of laughter spread through the group. Céline felt her face grow hot. She tried again, her voice small. She entrusted it to my father before her passing, Your Highness. He told me to bring it to you." Etienne raised a brow. "Your father, you say? And where is this trusted gentleman of letters?" "Gone, my lord. He passed last winter." A pause. For an instant, something in his eyes softened, but only for an instant. Then he smiled again, sharper now. "Then perhaps grief has made you mistaken. The Duchess has been gone 3 years. It seems you took your time crossing the fields." The crowd laughed again. Harder this time. Her throat tightened. She felt the letter crumple slightly between her fingers. "I beg you," she said. "Read it. It bears her seal. Please." He held out a hand lazily, as though indulging a child. "Very well, little messenger. Let us see this miracle." Céline stepped forward. The lights of the ballroom struck her eyes. The crowd parted just enough to make her loneliness complete. She placed the letter in his palm. For a moment their fingers brushed, and she saw the faintest flicker of curiosity in his gaze. Then he turned to the others. "Shall we see what wisdom a peasant carries to a prince?" "Read it aloud," someone called. "Yes, aloud." Another laughed. Céline's heart stopped. "No, Your Highness, it is not for the court." But he had already broken the wax seal. The ribbon snapped. The parchment unfolded. His smile lingered as his eyes moved down the page. Then slowly, the expression began to change. The laughter in the room faded, replaced by the uneasy hush of watching something private unravel. Etienne's face drained of color. His fingers trembled slightly as he read the lines again, slower this time, as though the words might rearrange themselves into something less dangerous. He looked up at her. "Where did you get this?" Her lips parted, but no sound came. The guests stared between them, sensing the shift but not understanding it. He took a step closer, his voice low now, meant only for her. "This seal, where did it come from?" "My father kept it," she whispered. "He said it must reach you when the time was right." "That's all I know." Etienne's jaw tightened. He turned the letter over as though looking for proof that it wasn't real. But the handwriting was unmistakable. His mother's, her delicate script, her private seal, the small crest no servant could imitate. Around them, the air had turned thick. The guests whispered, "What is it, Your Highness? A threat?" He didn't answer. His throat felt dry. He read the last lines again. Words that should never have seen light. Words that clawed at everything he had been raised to believe. Celine took a small step forward. "Your Highness, I meant no harm. My father said—" He cut her off, voice shaking now. "Your father was a peasant. How would he come by my mother's seal?" "I do not know," she said softly, "but she trusted him." Etienne laughed once, sharp and hollow. Trusted him? A woman of the crown, trusting a field hand? The tension broke into murmurs. A noblewoman near the front gasped, clutching her fan. Surely this is madness. Celine felt tears rising, but she forced her voice to hold. "My father told me she stayed once in our village, years ago. Before you were born. He said she left something in his care. I thought it was this letter. He said it was meant for her son." Etienne stared at her, the letter trembling between his fingers. "Enough," he said, more to himself than to her. He folded the parchment roughly, his movements clumsy now. The orchestra had stopped entirely. The grand ballroom of Villeneuve, once filled with laughter, now stood frozen in silence. He looked around at the faces watching him, friends, rivals, courtiers hungry for scandal. Then his eyes fell again on the girl before him, her cheeks streaked with tears, her shoulders drawn tight with humiliation. His chest burned with something he didn't yet recognize as guilt. "Leave," he said hoarsely. "Get out of here." Celine's breath caught. "But the letter! Leave!" The force in his voice echoed across the marble. The guards near the doorway stirred but hesitated, unsure whether to act. Celine turned, stumbling as she tried to make her way out. Her vision blurred. She could still hear the murmur of the nobles behind her, the quiet cruelty of those who had seen her made small. But before she reached the threshold, Etienne spoke again, his voice lower now, uncertain. "Wait." She froze. He looked down at the folded parchment, the seal cracked open, the words inside burning through his composure. "You said your father knew her," he said slowly. "Knew the Duchess?" Celine turned back toward him. "Yes." "And she trusted him." "She did." He studied her face, searching for deceit, for any trace of mockery. But she looked back at him with a raw honesty that unsettled him. He took a deep breath. "If this letter is true, then you have no idea what you've brought me." "I only brought what was asked," she said. "I only did what was right." The court had begun whispering again. Rumors already spun between fans and gloved hands. The prince who lost his temper over a peasant girl, the letter he would not show, the sudden silence that followed. Etienne turned sharply, calling for his steward. "Claude, clear the room." "My lord, clear it!" The musicians stopped pretending to tune their instruments. The nobles exchanged glances, reluctant but curious, unwilling to miss the scandal. Yet one by one they retreated toward the adjoining hall, whispering as they went. When the last of them was gone, only Celine remained, trembling in the vast, empty space of the ballroom. Etienne walked toward her slowly. Each step echoed. "Tell me everything," he said. "I cannot. I don't know everything." "Then tell me what you do know." She swallowed hard. "My father worked the land near the Abbey of Orléans. He once said a noble lady had taken refuge there years ago. She was kind, quiet, and afraid of being found. He never told me her name until she died. He said she left something behind, a promise sealed for her son. He said that one day, when her son was of age, it must reach him, Etienne's pulse roared in his ears. "And you are certain, certain, that woman was my mother? He showed me her ring before he died," she said. "It bore the same crest as the seal." Etienne turned away, pressing a hand to his forehead. The room spun. His mother's secrets had been buried for a reason. She had died with them. And now this girl, this trembling, dirt-born girl, had torn them open in front of half the court. He faced her again, his voice low. "You do not understand the danger of what you carry. I only wanted to fulfill her wish." He stared at her, unable to find words. The flicker of candlelight caught the tears still clinging to her lashes. For the first time that night, he saw her not as a peasant, but as a person, someone terrified, humiliated, yet still standing. He felt something break inside him. "Why did you not give it to my steward?" he asked quietly. "Because the seal said for your eyes alone," his mother's exact phrasing. His hands shook. Céline stepped closer, timid but resolute. "If I have done wrong, I beg forgiveness. But I could not ignore a dying woman's wish. You were meant to read it, my lord. Only you." Etienne looked at her for a long moment, his throat tight. The words on the parchment replayed in his mind. His mother's confession, her plea for the truth to remain hidden. The girl before him was not part of a scheme. She was part of that truth. The great doors creaked open behind them. The steward stepped inside, bowing hurriedly. "Your Highness, forgive the intrusion, but a royal messenger has arrived. He bears orders from Versailles. Urgent." Etienne did not move. His gaze was still locked on Céline. Claude cleared his throat. "The messenger insists, my lord. He asks to speak to you at once." Etienne's grip on the letter tightened until the parchment nearly tore. He whispered almost to himself, "Who gave you this?" Céline hesitated, confusion clouding her tear-streaked face. "My father, my lord." He said, before she could finish. The chamber doors burst fully open, the heavy sound of boots striking marble. A man in the livery of the royal household strode in, his voice cutting through the silence. "By order of His Majesty, Prince Etienne de Villeneuve is summoned to appear before the royal council immediately." The words hung in the air like thunder. The prince turned toward him slowly, his expression unreadable, the letter still trembling in his hand. Morning arrived pale and gray over Château de Villeneuve. The storm of whispers had already begun. Servants carried trays slower than usual, pausing to glance toward the prince's chambers, their curiosity barely hidden. The night's laughter had turned to rumor. By sunrise, the entire household spoke of the strange peasant girl, the torn seal, and the prince's sudden silence after reading her letter. Céline sat on a narrow bench inside a servant's room that smelled of soap and candle wax. The guards at the door didn't speak to her. They only stared ahead, pretending she wasn't there. She hadn't slept. Her eyes burned from crying, her heart from shame. Every moment from the ballroom replayed in her mind. The laughter, his voice, the sound of the letter tearing open. She pressed her palms to her face and prayed it had all been some cruel dream. The door opened. A woman entered, dressed in the neat uniform of a lady's maid. She looked older, cautious, but not unkind. "They told me to bring you bread," she said. "Eat. You'll need your strength." Céline hesitated. "Why am I locked in?" The maid lowered her voice. "Because no one knows what to make of you, girl. You brought a letter that frightened a prince. That alone is enough to make them think you dangerous. But I only—" "Quiet." The woman's eyes darted to the guards. "Do not speak unless asked. The less you say, the better." Céline nodded. She took the bread, though her throat felt too tight to swallow. Elsewhere in the chateau, Etienne paced his chamber, the letter unfolded on his desk. He had not slept either. His valet lingered by the door, pretending to arrange the prince's coat, but secretly watching the expression that crossed his master's face each time he read the words. Etienne spoke at last. "Send everyone away. No one enters this room." "Yes, Your Highness." When the door shut, he sank into the chair, pressing his temples. His mother's handwriting stared up at him. He had known her grace, her quiet sadness, but not this. This confession that rewrote everything he believed about his own blood. "My dearest son, should these words reach you, It means the truth could no longer be buried. The girl entrusted to the care of Jacques Moreau is of our family. Her name must remain hidden until the time is right. Protect her, for her existence guards your own." He whispered the lines aloud, as though saying them could make them less impossible. The girl, Céline Moreau, the same name. His mother had written these words nearly 20 years ago. He rose and walked to the window. The courtyard below glittered with frost. Somewhere down there, that same girl now sat imprisoned because of him. Claude, his steward, entered without knocking. "Your Highness, the royal messenger awaits in the hall. He will not leave until you respond to the summons." Etienne turned slowly. "I will see him." The messenger bowed deeply, a polished man in the king's blue and silver. "His Majesty commands your presence at Versailles within 3 days. Matters of inheritance," he said. "Something regarding the late Duchess's estate." Etienne's stomach tightened. "Did the king mention what prompted this urgency?" "No, my lord. Only that the letter found its way into the wrong hands." The prince froze. "The wrong hands?" The messenger bowed again. "His Majesty will expect you before the week's end." When the man left, Etienne's composure cracked. The court must have heard already. The seal, the scandal, the whispers. Someone must have written to Versailles before dawn. He turned to Claude. "No word of this to anyone. Not the guards, not the servants." "Yes, my lord." "But what of the girl?" Etienne hesitated. "She remains under watch. No one speaks to her. Forgive me, Highness, but keeping her here will only feed the gossip. The nobles already say she bewitched you." Etienne's voice hardened. "Do not repeat their stupidity. She is no witch." Claude lowered his head. "Then what is she, my lord?" The prince had no answer. By evening, Céline was summoned to the library. She entered hesitantly, the guards closing the door behind her. Etienne stood near the fire, his expression unreadable. For a moment she thought he might apologize, but he only said, "Sit." She obeyed. He studied her, his hands clasped behind his back. "You have caused quite a storm, Mademoiselle Moreau." "I never wished to cause anything." "I believe you," he said softly. "But the court does not." She frowned. "Why would they care about a letter?" "Because that letter bears my mother's seal," he said. "And it speaks of matters that could undo everything my family stands upon." She met his eyes for the first time since the ball. "Then tell me what it says." "I deserve to know." Etienne hesitated, then unfolded the parchment. His voice lowered. "It says that before her marriage, my mother lived for a time in your village, that she entrusted a child to the care of a man named Jacques Moreau." Céline's breath caught. "My father." He nodded. "She wrote that the child was of noble birth and must be protected at all cost. She warned that if the truth were ever revealed, it could destroy both families." Céline's hands trembled in her lap. "A child? You mean?" "The letter names you." She shook her head. "That cannot be. I was born long after she left our village." "She wrote your name," he said, "and the date of your birth." Silence stretched between them. The fire crackled softly. Céline whispered, "If that is true, then what does it make me?" Etienne looked away. "I do not yet know. But if this becomes public, the council will decide, not I." She stood abruptly. "Then they will think I lied. They will think I forged it." "Exactly," he said. "And that is why you cannot remain here." Her heart pounded. "You mean to send me away?" "Yes, before Versailles hears your name. Before they send their own men to question you." She took a step back. "You wish to be rid of me. I wish to protect you." His voice was tense, almost pleading. "You do not understand how dangerous this is. If the council believes this letter to be treason, they will destroy us both. Then tell them the truth." "I cannot. The truth would destroy my mother's name." She stared at him, anger and despair twisting inside her. "You humiliated me before everyone, and now you would hide me again for your own sake. You speak of protection, but you only protect yourself." He flinched at her words. "You think me that selfish?" "I think you have never known what it means to be powerless." For a moment, neither spoke. The crackle of fire filled the silence. Etienne stepped closer, his voice low. "If I could undo that night, I would. But what I did cannot be erased." Let me at least save you from what comes next." "And what comes next?" she asked. "The council will demand the letter. They will search for the girl who carried it. If they find you here, they will question you until you say what they wish to hear." She stared at the flames. "And if I refuse to leave, then you will not live to see what they decide." The words hung heavy. He hadn't meant them as a threat, but she heard the truth beneath them. She whispered, "Why do you care now?" He opened his mouth to answer, but stopped, because the guilt in his chest had become unbearable. Because the sight of her eyes in that crowded ballroom haunted him. Because the letter had called him to a truth he did not have the courage to face. He turned away. "Prepare to leave by dawn. Claude will arrange a carriage to Orléans. You will have coin enough to travel beyond the city if you wish. Take it and go." Celine's throat burned. "You think distance will erase what your court saw? You think I will forget?" He looked at her, quiet now. "No, but perhaps someday you will forgive." When she left the room, he sank into the chair by the fire, the letter still in his hand. The flames licked at the parchment's edges, but he couldn't bring himself to burn it. Outside, Celine walked the dim corridor. The guards followed a few steps behind. She passed nobles who turned away, pretending not to know her. One whispered, "The prince's peasant." Another giggled. Celine's head stayed high, though her stomach twisted. In the servants' quarters, the same maid who had brought her bread waited with a bundle of clothes. "Here," she said. "Plain enough to pass unnoticed." Celine took them quietly. "Will you tell anyone?" The woman shook her head. "No, but be gone before the sun rises. They are already sharpening their tongues." She changed into the plain dress, the one she'd worn when she first arrived. Her reflection in the small mirror looked pale, thinner than she remembered, but her eyes were steady. At the first light of dawn, the carriage stood ready near the side gate. Claude waited beside it, his expression grim. "You must travel alone," he said. "The prince cannot be seen aiding you." Celine nodded. Tell him nothing." Claude hesitated. "He already carries enough regret, mademoiselle." She climbed into the carriage. The wheels creaked as it rolled down the cobbled path, past the frost-dusted fields, past the gilded gates that would forever separate her from that world. She did not look back. By noon, Etienne received word that the royal investigators had arrived from Versailles. They carried sealed orders and questions that chilled him to the bone. The rumor, they said, had reached the king's ear. A letter, a missing girl, a potential scandal involving the late Duchess. He answered carefully, concealing the truth. "The letter was a forgery," he said. "Its bearer has been dismissed." But one investigator, a lean man with sharp eyes, studied him too closely. "And where is this bearer now, Your Highness?" "Gone," Etienne replied. "She returned to her village." The man smiled faintly. "Then we shall find her." Etienne's hands tightened behind his back. "That will not be necessary. His Majesty will decide what is necessary." That night, the chateau slept uneasily. Etienne stood on the balcony, the letter still hidden within his coat. He thought of her face as she left, of the quiet defiance in her voice. A part of him hoped she had already crossed beyond Orléans, far from the eyes that hunted truth. But by morning, the news reached him. The investigators had traced her carriage and royal soldiers were on the road. Etienne called for his horse. "If they reach her first, all is lost," he said. Claude tried to stop him. "My lord, if you go after her, they will think you complicit. Then let them think what they wish." He left before sunrise, riding hard through the frost-covered fields. The road stretched endless before him, the wind biting at his face. Each mile felt like a penance. Meanwhile, in a small village near Orléans, Celine found shelter in the home of an old seamstress who recognized her name. The woman's wrinkled hands trembled as she poured tea. "Your father helped me once," she said. "He told me of the lady who stayed with him, your Duchess. He said she trusted him with something precious." Celine leaned forward. "Do you know what it was?" The woman nodded slowly. "A secret, child. One that bound the fate of nobles and peasants alike." Before Celine could ask more, the sound of hooves thundered down the road outside. The seamstress hurried to the window, her face paling. "Riders," she whispered. "Soldiers." Celine's heart stopped. Are they looking for me? The woman nodded. Go, child. Through the back door. Now. Celine gathered her cloak and fled into the fields. The wind tore at her hair. The letter, though she no longer carried it, still seemed to burn in her memory like a brand. Behind her, the riders' shouts echoed across the hills. Etienne reached the outskirts of Orléans just as dusk fell. The innkeeper told him soldiers had passed through hours earlier, searching for a young woman traveling alone. His heart pounded. He rode faster. The last light of day bled across the horizon when he finally saw her figure ahead, running through the open meadow, her cloak billowing like a dark flag in the wind. He spurred his horse forward. "Celine!" he called. She turned, startled, then froze. He dismounted, breathless, his coat torn by branches. She stared at him in disbelief. "Why are you here?" "To make right what I've done." Before she could answer, the distant sound of horns cut through the air, sharp, cold, and close. Soldiers were coming. Celine turned toward the sound of horns, her breath shallow, her pulse a storm inside her chest. The echo of the soldiers' shouts rolled through the meadow like thunder. Etienne caught her arm. "We must go," he said. "Go where?" she cried. "They'll find us wherever we run. Trust me." His voice broke through her panic, steady and low. "There's a place nearby, an abbey, ruined, forgotten. No one will search there tonight." She hesitated, eyes wide with fear, but the sound of galloping hooves drew closer. Etienne pulled her hand, and they plunged into the thicket beyond the meadow. Branches whipped at their faces, tearing through cloth and skin. Her breath came ragged. She stumbled once, nearly falling, but he caught her by the waist and pushed her onward. "Keep low," he whispered. "Don't speak." They ran until the cries of the soldiers faded behind them. The forest grew darker, the air thick with the scent of earth and moss. Ahead rose the crumbling shape of the old abbey, its stone walls veined with ivy. Etienne led her inside through a broken archway. The air was cool, the silence almost holy. Celine sank to the ground, trembling. Etienne bent to catch his breath. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then she said, "You shouldn't have come after me. They'll think you've betrayed the crown." "Let them," he said. "I couldn't let them take you." Her eyes glistened in the dim light. "You've already risked enough for me." He gave a tired half-smile. "No, I've risked enough for my pride. This is different." She turned away, hugging her knees. "If they catch us, they'll call it treason. Then we'll find a way before they do." Outside, the last rays of dusk bled through the broken windows, painting the stones in soft gold. Etienne found an old cloth from a fallen altar and placed it over her shoulders. "You're cold." And she looked up at him, surprised by his gentleness. "Why are you doing this?" He sat beside her, leaning his back against the wall. "Because last night, in that ballroom, I became the man I swore I'd never be. I saw myself through your eyes, and I was ashamed." Celine's voice was quiet. "You think shame will change what's been done?" "No," he said. "But perhaps courage will." For a while, the only sound was the whisper of wind through the ruined arches. Celine rested her head on her arms. "When I was a child, I used to pray for one thing, that the nobles who passed through our village might see us as people, just once, not as dirt beneath their boots." He listened, his gaze fixed on the fading light. "You should have been seen long ago. You can't undo a lifetime with words, my lord." He looked at her. "Then let me try with actions." Her lips trembled, but she said nothing. The exhaustion of days weighed heavy, and at last she drifted into uneasy sleep beside him. Etienne stayed awake, watching the flicker of moonlight across the broken floor. Each breath she took felt like a reminder of what he owed her: truth, protection, and perhaps forgiveness he didn't deserve. When dawn came, he rose quietly and stepped outside. The forest lay shrouded in mist. In the distance, he could hear the faint clang of armor. They had not gone far enough. He returned to the abbey and touched her shoulder gently. "We must move again." She opened her eyes, still half in dreams. "Where will we go now?" "To the river. If we follow it north, we can reach the border of the Villeneuve lands. Beyond that, the king's men have no claim." Celine stood, brushing the dust from her dress. And what then? Then I will make this right. They left through the forest, careful to keep to the shadows. The morning air carried the distant sounds of searching, voices calling, dogs barking. Each sound made Celine flinch. Etienne's jaw tightened, his hand resting briefly on her shoulder to steady her. Hours passed before they reached the riverbank. The water shimmered in the sunlight, a ribbon of silver winding through reeds and stone. Etienne found an old fisherman's hut, abandoned and half collapsed. They entered, grateful for shelter. Inside, Celine sank onto a wooden crate. "How long can we run?" she whispered. "As long as it takes," he said. "You speak as if you have a choice. You're a prince. Your place is in the court." "My place," he said quietly, "is where I can face what I've done." She looked at him, uncertain whether to believe him. "You can't hide forever. They'll come for you too." He crouched in front of her. "Then we'll face them together." Her eyes softened, but fear still lingered. "Why would you ruin yourself for me?" "Because the letter doesn't only threaten me, it reveals me. Everything I was built on was a lie. If my mother's words are true, your blood and mine are tied by something greater than class. I don't yet understand it, but I will not let them bury it again." Celine shook her head. "If what you say is true, then my father carried that burden alone. He must have feared this moment." Etienne's expression gentled. "He was a braver man than I've ever been." Outside, the river glimmered between trees. The sound of birds mixed with the faint echo of distant horns. They exchanged a glance. "They're close," she said. Etienne looked through a gap in the boards. "Too close. We'll have to leave the horses. Then how will we escape?" He turned back to her. "We won't run this time. We'll hide until nightfall, then head east toward the mountains." The hours crept by. Celine dozed in the corner while Etienne kept watch. His thoughts tangled between duty and remorse. He had once believed power made a man untouchable. Now, hunted and stripped of his title, he felt more human than ever. As evening fell, a sound broke the stillness, boots crunching outside. Celine's eyes flew open. Etienne motioned for silence. They held their breath as voices murmured nearby. "The tracks lead here," one soldier said. Another replied, "Check inside. The king wants them alive." Celine's heart slammed against her ribs. Etienne grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the back wall where the boards hung loose. He whispered, "Go when I say." The door creaked open. Dust drifted in with the light. The first soldier stepped through, his sword clinking against his belt. Etienne pushed the board aside. "Now!" They slipped through the gap, sliding down the slope behind the hut into the reeds by the river. The soldiers shouted, their footsteps pounding after them. Celine stumbled, catching herself on a root. Etienne lifted her by the arm. "Into the water!" The river was cold and fast. They waded in, the current dragging at their clothes. Celine gasped as the water rose to her waist. Etienne steadied her, his arm firm around her. "Hold on to me," he said. They moved against the current, hidden by the rush of water and reeds. Behind them, the soldiers searched the riverbank, their torches flickering. One called out, "They've gone downstream." Etienne pulled Celine toward the far shore, breathless and soaked. When they reached the bank, they collapsed onto the grass, shivering. Celine laughed weakly through her exhaustion. "If the Duchess could see you now," he smiled faintly, "she'd say it's about time I learned humility." For the first time, she smiled back. It was small, uncertain, but real. They found shelter in a hollow beneath an old oak. Etienne lit a small fire, careful to shield the smoke. Celine sat close to the warmth, her wet dress steaming slightly. He glanced at her, his expression softer than it had ever been. "You're freezing." "I'll survive," she said. "I've lived through worse winters. You shouldn't have to survive like this," he said quietly. "Not anymore." She looked at him across the flickering fire. "You still think you can change the world with promises?" "No," he said, "only with truth." She was silent for a moment. "And what is that truth, Your Highness?" He hesitated. "That I no longer care for the crown if it means living in lies." Her breath caught. "You would give it up?" "For what I once mocked," he said. "For honesty, for dignity, for what you have, And I never did. The firelight danced across his face, revealing a gentleness that unsettled her. She turned away, whispering, "You speak like a man who's already lost everything." "Perhaps I have," he said, "but for the first time, it feels right." The night deepened. Outside, the forest stirred with distant sounds. An owl, a gust of wind, the faint crackle of branches. They sat in silence, the fire between them shrinking to embers. When Celine finally spoke, her voice was small. "Do you think your mother meant for us to meet?" Etienne looked up. "I don't know, but she wrote that our fates were bound. Perhaps this is what she meant." Celine drew her cloak tighter. "Bound by pain, maybe. Bound by truth," he said. She met his gaze. "And when the truth ruins us both?" He didn't answer. The fire hissed softly. At dawn, the forest filled with the cry of crows. Etienne stirred first. He rose, brushing ash from his coat. "We can't stay here." "Where will we go?" "To the council," he said. "If I keep running, they'll twist the story. They'll call you a fraud, me a fool. I'll face them myself." Celine shook her head. "They'll destroy you." "Then let them," he said. "But I will not let them destroy you. You can't protect me from them." He stepped closer. "Maybe not. But I can stand beside you while they try." She wanted to believe him. She wanted to hate him. But somewhere between the humiliation and the running, something inside her had changed. His arrogance had fallen away, leaving a man she could almost trust. Almost. By the time they reached the main road, the sun was high. A farmer's cart approached, piled with hay. Etienne waved it down. The driver squinted. "We need passage to the city," Etienne said. "I can pay." The man eyed their torn clothes and mud-streaked faces. "Looks like you've paid enough already. Climb in." They rode hidden under the hay as the cart creaked toward Orléans. The city walls appeared by late afternoon, gray against the sky. Etienne stared at them in silence, his thoughts heavy. Celine touched his arm. "What will you say to them?" "The truth," he said simply. "All of it. And if they don't believe you," he gave a faint smile, "then I will have nothing left to lose." When the cart stopped, they climbed down quietly. The air buzzed with the noise of the market, the smell of bread and smoke. Etienne pulled his hood low, leading her through narrow streets until they reached the gates of the magistrate's hall. Celine stopped. "This is madness." "Perhaps," he said, "but it's the only way to end it." Before she could argue, he pushed the heavy doors open. The marble hall inside shimmered with candlelight. Guards turned at once, startled by the sight of the prince in such disarray. "I must speak to the royal council," Etienne said firmly. "At once." The guards exchanged uneasy glances, then hurried to obey. Celine stood frozen at the entrance, her heart thudding. She wanted to run, to disappear into the crowd outside, but she couldn't leave him now. Moments later, the chamber doors opened. A dozen noblemen sat in judgment, their expressions a mix of curiosity and disdain. Etienne stepped forward, pulling the letter from his coat. "Your Highness," one councillor said coldly, "you were ordered to present yourself at Versailles, not here." "I bring what Versailles seeks," he replied. "The letter and the truth behind it." The room stirred. Celine watched as he laid the letter upon the table, his voice clear and unwavering. "This document is no forgery. It bears my mother's seal. It speaks of a child she placed under protection, this woman standing behind me." Gasps rippled through the chamber. "She is of noble blood," Etienne continued, "and I will not see her name dragged through the mud for my own salvation." The councillors erupted in murmurs. One demanded, "Are you confessing to treason?" "I am confessing to cruelty," he said, "and to the truth." The head councillor rose, his face pale with shock. "Then both of you will answer before the king himself." Etienne looked back at Celine. "So be it." The guards moved forward, but he did not resist. Celine met his gaze across the hall. There was no fear in his eyes now, only resolve. Then, from outside the chamber, a shout echoed down the corridor. "By order of His Majesty, seize them both!" The guards surged forward, their boots striking the marble floor like thunder. Celine froze as the echo filled the council chamber. Etienne stepped in front of her instinctively, his arm outstretched. "Stand down," he said, his voice steady. "No one will touch her." The head counselor slammed his hand against the table. "You forget your place, Your Highness. You stand accused of concealing royal correspondence and harboring a false noblewoman. His Majesty's orders are clear." Etienne faced the guards, his tone cold. "If you obey your king, then you will also hear him. I am still Prince of Villeneuve until he strips me of that name, and I will deliver my own defense before any man dares to seize her." The soldiers hesitated. The room filled with murmurs. Finally, one guard lowered his sword. "The council may deliberate, my lord, but if the king's decree stands, both of you must appear in Versailles by week's end." "Then I shall go," Etienne said, freely. "But she remains under my protection until then." The head counselor's lips tightened. "You are gambling your crown on a peasant girl." Etienne met his stare. Perhaps it was never mine to keep. He turned to Céline, his voice softening. "Come." The guards allowed them to leave under escort. Outside, the courtyard air smelled of rain and dust. The sky hung low, heavy with clouds. Céline walked beside him in silence, her hands clasped to keep them from trembling. Once inside the carriage, she finally spoke. "You shouldn't have defied them. They'll take everything from you." "They already have," he said quietly. "All that's left is the truth." She looked out the window, the city passing in blurred shades of gray. "You don't understand how power works, do you? They'll twist your words until they hang you by them." He smiled faintly. "Then let them. A crown built on lies isn't worth wearing." The carriage rattled over cobblestones. Neither spoke again until they reached the edge of the city. There, Etienne ordered the driver to take the road south, not to Versailles, but to the abbey ruins where they had first hidden. When they arrived, the place seemed smaller than before, lonelier. Rain began to fall, pattering against the stones. Etienne dismissed the driver, promising to send for him the next morning. Céline stood beneath the archway, her cloak drawn close. "You brought me back here?" "It's the only place untouched by their reach," he said. "For tonight, at least." Inside, he lit a small lantern. The flickering light cast long shadows on the crumbling walls. Céline sat on the same stone bench as before. "Why didn't you let them take me?" she asked. "It would have saved you." "Because I don't want saving," he replied. "Not if it means turning my back again." She studied him. The arrogance she'd once despised was gone. His eyes were tired, but calm. "What do you plan to do?" "I will face the king," he said. "But before that, I must tell you what the letter truly revealed." Céline's heart beat faster. "You said enough already. That it named me. That it spoke of your mother." "There was more," he interrupted softly. "It said the child she entrusted to Jacques Moreau was not a secret heir or threat to my name. It said that child carried the blood of a man she loved before she was forced into marriage. She wrote that she had failed him, and that her son, me, must protect the child she left behind." Céline's breath caught. "Then we are not," he shook his head, "not bound by blood, but bound by her guilt. She loved your father once, before duty claimed her." Céline's eyes filled with tears. "My father never told me. He always said there were things I would not understand." Etienne lowered his voice. He must have known the danger. If the world learned that a prince's mother once loved a common man, it would have destroyed her reputation, and mine. That's why he hid you. That's why the letter had to reach me when it did." Céline pressed her hands to her face. "All of this, because of love, long buried." "Yes," he said, "and because I was too blind to see what it cost others." The rain grew heavier, the sound echoing through the roofless nave. Etienne sat beside her, his hands folded. "When I first saw you, I saw only what I was taught to see: class, birth, distance. I thought myself above you. You humiliated me," she whispered. "I did," he said simply, "and I will never forget it." Silence stretched between them. Then he turned toward her. "But that night changed me. You stood there trembling, and still you tried to speak truth to power. I have not known such courage in my court or my bloodline." Céline looked at him, the lantern light flickering across his face. "Courage is easy when you have nothing to lose." "You're wrong," he said gently. "It's hardest then." Her lips trembled. "What happens now?" "The council won't forgive you." "I don't seek forgiveness," he said. "Only justice. For you. For my mother. For the truth she carried in shame." Celine turned away, her thoughts spinning. "And if the king refuses to hear it, then I will speak louder," he said. She almost smiled. "You sound like a fool." "I am," he admitted, "but a fool with purpose." For a long while they listened to the rain. Then quietly she said, "My father used to tell me the truth has no crown. It bows to no man." Etienne's eyes softened. He was right. The rain slowed, fading to a mist. Celine rose and walked toward the open archway. The sky beyond was clearing, a few stars flickering through. "When I was locked in your servant's chamber, I hated you," she said. "I swore I'd never forgive what you did. I wouldn't have blamed you. But now," she continued, "I see something different. You're still proud, still reckless. But you're trying." He approached her slowly. "Will you forgive me then?" She hesitated. "Not yet, but perhaps someday." He nodded, accepting it. "Then that is enough for me." They stood together beneath the ruined arch, watching the clouds drift apart. The moonlight spilled across the stones, pale and silent. For the first time since the ball, there was no laughter, no cruelty, no audience. Only the quiet understanding that they were both captives of a world built on pretense. The next morning, they set out for Versailles. The journey was long, and neither spoke much. When they stopped at a small inn for the night, Etienne paid the keeper with the last of his gold. "We'll need a carriage to the capital," he told her. The innkeeper glanced between them curiously but asked no questions. Celine watched Etienne's movements, precise, deliberate, the gestures of a man who knew each step might be his last as a prince. That night, she couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, the moonlight tracing patterns across the floor. Etienne stirred awake and saw her silhouette. "You should rest," he said softly. "I can't." He rose and joined her at the window. "What troubles you?" "The world," she murmured. "What it will do to you for standing beside me." He smiled faintly. "Let it try." "Why do you keep saying that?" she asked. "As if pride could shield you." "It isn't pride," he said. "It's peace. I've made my choice." Celine looked at him, searching for fear in his face. There was none. "You really mean to face the king?" "Yes. And if he demands your silence, then he will hear me louder still." She exhaled shakily. "You're impossible." "I've been called worse," he said, smiling again. When morning came, they left before dawn. The carriage wheels clattered over the stones as the countryside rolled by. Villages woke slowly around them, chimneys smoking, children chasing geese across muddy lanes. It was a world Celine knew well, but one Etienne had only glimpsed through a carriage window. He watched her watching it. "It's strange," he said quietly. "All my life, I was taught to rule these lands. Yet I never truly saw them." "Now you do," she said, "but too late." He nodded. "Maybe, but I will see them still." By dusk, the golden spires of Versailles glimmered on the horizon. The air grew heavy with silence as the carriage passed through the palace gates. Guards lined the entrance, their expressions unreadable. Inside, the great hall stretched before them, a glittering sea of mirrors and light. The king's advisors waited at the far end. When Etienne stepped forward, the whispers began at once. Celine followed a few paces behind, her heart pounding. The king's voice echoed across the chamber. "Etienne de Villeneuve, you stand accused of defying royal summons, withholding correspondence of the crown, and protecting a false noblewoman. What have you to say for yourself?" Etienne bowed. "Only that the woman you call false has more nobility than the titles around this room." A murmur rippled through the assembly. The king's eyes narrowed. "You test my patience." "I seek only the truth," Etienne said. "This letter, written by my mother, reveals a secret that should not have been hidden. The girl, Celine Moreau, is not an enemy to the crown, but the daughter of the man my mother loved, before duty tore them apart." Gasps filled the room. The king leaned forward. You claim the late Duchess broke her vows. I claim she was human, Etienne said, and that her honor lies not in silence, but in truth. The court erupted in whispers. Céline felt every gaze pierce through her, yet Etienne did not flinch. The king rose slowly. You understand what your words imply? That you defend a scandal that could stain your name forever? I understand, Etienne said, and I accept it. The king studied him for a long moment, then turned his gaze toward Céline. Step forward, girl. Céline's legs felt weak, but she obeyed. You delivered this letter, the king said. Do you confirm its contents? Yes, your majesty. Her voice trembled, but she forced it steady. My father kept it safe until his death. He told me it must reach the prince, no matter the cost. The king's expression softened slightly. And what is it you seek now? Nothing, she said quietly. Only that the truth be known. Silence fell. The court waited for the king's judgment. Finally he spoke. The sins of the dead cannot condemn the living. The Duchess is gone. Her memory will remain untouched. But her son, he looked at Etienne. You have risked everything for honesty. Perhaps that is worth more than the crown you wear. Etienne bowed his head. I ask for no mercy, only that she be free. The king nodded once. Then so she shall. And you, Prince of Villeneuve, will keep your title, for now. But your court will watch you closely. Pray your conscience does not undo you again. The words struck like both punishment and pardon. Etienne exhaled slowly. Thank you, sire. Céline lowered her head, relief flooding through her. The guards stepped aside, and the council dispersed in murmuring disbelief. Outside, the gardens of Versailles shimmered under the first light of sunset. The fountains sang softly, the air cool and golden. Etienne and Céline walked in silence until they reached the marble terrace. She stopped, turning to him. It's over then, for the world, perhaps, he said. But not for me. What will you do now? I will return to Villeneuve, he said, and rebuild what pride destroyed. She nodded, her heart heavy yet peaceful. And me? You're free, he said quietly. You owe no one anything, not even me. She looked up at him, unsure whether to thank him or cry. You risked everything, and I'd do it again, he said. Her voice trembled. Then why does it feel like goodbye? He smiled sadly. Because it is. She turned her face away, blinking hard against the tears. Etienne stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. If ever you wish to see Villeneuve again, you'll find its doors open. Before she could answer, the palace bells began to ring, their sound rising over the gardens, solemn and clear. She turned toward the sound, and when she looked back, Etienne was already walking toward the gates, his cloak catching the wind like a shadow fading into light. The bells of Versailles echoed long after Etienne was gone. Their sound lingered in Céline's chest, like the fading heartbeat of something unfinished. The gardens shimmered beneath the evening sun, but she felt only the stillness that follows a storm. She stood there for a long time, hands clasped before her, until the light slipped behind the trees and the court began to forget she existed. When she finally turned away, she knew she could not stay. Versailles was no place for truth. It glittered like a cage, beautiful, but cold. By dawn, she left through the servants' gate, her belongings in a small bundle, her heart heavier than it had ever been. The road back to Orléans was long, lined with bare trees and silence. Villagers greeted her kindly, but did not know what to make of her fine speech or worn cloak. She said little, only that she was returning home. Yet home, when she reached it, no longer felt the same. Her father's cottage stood empty, the fields half wild. She swept the dust from the hearth and lit a small fire, but its warmth did not reach the ache inside her. Each day she worked the land, her hands raw again, her body remembering the rhythm of toil. Yet her thoughts were always elsewhere, on a letter, a voice, a prince who had walked away with gentleness in his eyes. She told herself it was better this way. The world had restored its order, peasants to their soil, princes to their palaces. And yet when the wind stirred through the trees at dusk, she would pause and turn, half believing she'd hear his horse on the road. Months passed. The king's decree reached the villages. The Prince of Villeneuve had kept his title, but he had withdrawn from court life, devoting his wealth to rebuilding the estates ruined by taxes and neglect. Peasants whispered that he had changed, that he visited the fields himself, speaking to farmers, refusing tribute from the poor. Some called it madness, others called it grace. Celine listened to the stories without a word. Sometimes she smiled. Sometimes she turned away so no one would see her tears. Then, one spring morning, a knock came at her door. She opened it to find a young boy standing there, clutching a sealed envelope. His face was red from the run. "A letter from Mademoiselle Moreau," he said, holding it out with both hands. Celine took it slowly. The seal was simple, unmarked. But she knew that handwriting. Her heart beat faster as she broke it open. "Celine, if ever you still believe truth deserves its reward, come to Villeneuve on the first day of spring. The gardens will bloom again, though not as before. Etienne." Her hands trembled. She read it twice, then again, until the ink blurred. For a long time she stood in the doorway, the fields stretching before her, the morning light soft and golden. Then she packed a small satchel, locked the cottage door, and began to walk. It took her 2 days to reach Villeneuve. The road wound through meadows she had once crossed in shame, past the gates where laughter had once pierced her heart. But the chateau she found was not the same. The lanterns were dimmer now, the music gone. Workers moved through the gardens, pruning vines, mending walls. The prince's crest still adorned the gate, but its polish had faded. When she hesitated at the entrance, a servant recognized her and hurried forward. "Mademoiselle Moreau? The master said you might come. He waits in the east garden." Her throat tightened. She followed the path she remembered too well, the same marble steps where she had once stood trembling before the court. Yet the garden beyond had changed. The fountains ran again, but quietly, their water catching the morning light. Flowers had been planted where there had once been gravel. Everything felt humbler, more alive. At the far end, by the rose arbor, stood Etienne. He was not dressed as a prince now, but as a man at work, sleeves rolled, boots dusted with soil. He turned at the sound of her footsteps, and for a moment neither spoke. She saw the change in him first, the calm steadiness, the lines softened by labor and solitude. He looked not like the prince who had mocked her, nor the man who had pleaded before the king, but someone in between, someone real. "You came," he said quietly. "I wasn't sure I would," she replied. "I wasn't sure you'd forgive me," he said. "I haven't," she said, though her voice was gentler than her words. He smiled faintly. "Then perhaps this is where forgiveness begins." She looked around the garden. "You rebuilt everything, with my own hands," he said. "The court calls it madness, but I wanted to remember what it means to create instead of destroy." She nodded. "It's beautiful. So are you," he said, before catching himself. "Forgive me." "That was," she interrupted softly. "True?" He met her eyes. "Yes." They stood in silence, the sound of the fountains filling the air. Finally, he spoke again. "I wrote to you because I couldn't live with what I left unsaid. The night I humiliated you broke something in me that power could never repair. I thought the crown was my duty, but it was pride. I thought birth made me noble, but it was you who taught me what nobility is." Celine's gaze fell to the ground. "And what is it, my lord?" "Choosing truth over comfort," he said. "Kindness over pride, and love over fear." Her breath caught. "Love?" He stepped closer. "Yes, Celine. Love. I thought I understood it once, but I was a fool. Love is not possession or beauty or conquest. It's humility. It's standing before the person you wronged and asking nothing but a chance to make things right." Her eyes shone, though she tried to blink away the tears. "You can't ask that of me," she whispered. "Not after everything. I ask for nothing," he said. "Only that you know what my heart holds." She turned away, her hands shaking. "You think words can erase what happened? That a prince can simply decide to love a peasant and the world will bow to it? I don't care what the world does," he said. "Let them talk. Let them laugh again if they must. I will not hide behind their rules any longer." She faced him then, anger and sorrow warring in her voice. "You say that now, but you don't know what it means to live as I have. to be looked down upon, to be invisible. He stepped forward, his voice low and steady. Then teach me. Let me see the world through your eyes, even if it humbles me 1,000 times over. Let me earn the right to stand beside you, not above you. Her tears fell then, quiet and unchecked. You don't know what you're asking. I do, he said. I've lived without you, and I know the emptiness of it. I've seen what power becomes when it serves only itself. If I must give up my title, I will. If I must lose the chateau, I will. But don't ask me to live without the one thing that has made me human again. She shook her head, unable to speak. Etienne reached into his coat and drew out a small ring, simple gold, worn with age. It was my mother's, he said softly. She wrote in her letter that it should belong to the one who taught her son compassion. I believe that person is you. Celine stared at the ring, her breath trembling. I can't. You can, he said, because love is not the gift of the rich or the right of the titled. It's the courage to choose someone despite the world. She hesitated, tears shining on her cheeks. And what if I choose wrong? He smiled faintly. Then we'll be wrong together. The wind stirred through the roses, carrying the scent of new blooms. Somewhere a bird sang, quick and bright. Celine looked at him for a long time, and in his eyes she saw not the prince who had mocked her, but the man who had knelt in the mud, who had risked his crown for her name. She reached out, her hand trembling, and touched his cheek. You've changed, she whispered. I had to, he said. You showed me who I was. Her voice was barely a breath. And who are you now? He covered her hand with his. Yours, if you'll have me. The moment hung between them, fragile, luminous. Then she nodded once, her lips trembling into a smile. Then I suppose the answer is yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger, his hand steady despite the tears in his eyes. Then it's done, he murmured. She laughed softly through her tears. It's never done, Etienne. It's only beginning. He drew her close then, slowly, as though afraid she might vanish. His forehead rested against hers, his breath warm. Then let it begin here, he whispered. She closed her eyes. The world around them seemed to fade, the ruins, the years, the pain. There was only the sound of the fountains, the scent of roses, and the quiet rhythm of two hearts finding the same beat at last. When they finally pulled apart, her cheeks were flushed, her smile unguarded. What will they say when they learn their prince has married a peasant? They'll say what they always say, he replied. But this time I won't listen. She laughed again, light and free. Then I'll remind you of that when the courtiers whisper. Please do, he said, his grin returning. I'll need your voice to silence them. They walked together through the garden, hand in hand. The servants watched from a distance, whispering, but none dared interrupt. The evening sun bathed them in gold. Etienne stopped beside the fountain, turning to her. I once made this place a prison for your heart, he said. Now I wish it to be our home. Celine looked around at the blooming roses, the clear water, the quiet grace of it all. It already feels like one. He touched her cheek gently. Then stay, not as a guest, not as a memory. As my wife. Her eyes widened. So soon. I've waited long enough, he said. And so have you. She smiled through tears. Yes, Etienne. I'll stay. The bells of Villeneuve rang that evening. Not for a ball, nor a coronation, but for a wedding unlike any other. The villagers gathered outside the gates, astonished to see their prince standing beside the woman who had once come to him in rags. No silk, no crown, no parade, only a simple ceremony beneath the blooming roses. When the vows were spoken, Celine's voice trembled, and Etienne's eyes shone, as if the world had begun anew. As dusk fell, music rose softly from the courtyard. Simple, joyful, honest. The laughter that filled the air was not cruel this time, but warm. Children danced near the fountains, servants toasted with wine, and the new couple stood apart, watching it all. Celine leaned against Etienne's shoulder. Do you think your mother would have approved? He smiled. She wrote the ending herself. We just had to live it. The stars began to appear above the chateau, bright and clear. Etienne took her hand, raising it to his lips. From humiliation to grace, he said softly. You taught me both. She smiled, resting her head against him. Then remember this, my lord. Grace is not given, it's chosen. He wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. Then I choose you. Always. The fountains whispered, the roses swayed, and the night carried their laughter across the fields. And in that quiet, shining garden, where cruelty had once bloomed, love, humble and enduring, finally took its place. Thank you so much for listening to this story all the way to the end. We hope it moved you as much as it moved us while telling it. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave us a comment telling us where you're listening from and what you liked the most. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like as a show of support. That really motivates us to keep creating and sharing more stories full of emotion and life lessons. And before we go, we want to remind you that an exciting and heartwarming story recommendation will appear on the final screen. If you'd like to enjoy it, just click on the video. Thank you once again for being here, and we'll see you in the next story.